Hi there, my name is Matt, and I'm here in Portland today with some of my best friends who are all musicians in the Portland Symphony Orchestra. Now, my friends are all off in another room right now getting ready to play a piece of music. What piece of music, you might ask? Well, I am really excited because today they're going to be playing one of my favorite pieces of music called Aesop's Fables by the composer Tom Myron. Now, this piece of music is broken up into 5 parts called movements, and each part tells a different story. Now, put those listening ears on and see if you can find any solo instruments in this first story we'll be telling called The Bear and the Bees. Early one morning, a chubby, clumsy bear was tromping around in the forest, eating every juicy berry he could snatch. Tromp, tromp, tromp. His big paws found their way through the woods. With a thump, he stumbled into an old log lying in the path. Grrr! He growled with hunger. Every bear knows that bees keep their honey in old logs. And I love honey. The bear's eyes grew wide as he got an idea. If the bees aren't home, I could steal their honey. Are any of you buzzers in there? He growled at the log. No bees flew out. He nudged the log with his nose. Still no bees flew out. Another nudge. And not a sound. Ready to take the final nudge, he began to hear something. The buzzing was soft, then louder, louder, then... Yo! The bear yelled in his fiercest, maddest growl. No one steals our honey, buzzed the queen bee as she got ready to sting the bear again. And no one stings me, the bear growled. He was so angry that he shoved the log as hard as he could. Unfortunately for the bear, this shove brought out the whole swarm of bees who began stinging him all over his body. The poor bear ran from the log and plopped into a nearby brook, leaving the bees buzzing back to their honey. Wow, that was a great story. Now, did you notice that one of the instruments stood out more than the others? And maybe this instrument sounded like the character of the buzzing bumblebees. Well, I've got my good friend Amanda here with us today to tell her about that instrument. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Tell me, Amanda, what is that cool-looking instrument you've got in your hands right there?
So this is the oboe, and it's a very special double reed instrument. It's the higher pitched of the 2 double reeds that you'll be hearing today. So it's kind of unique because the reed makes a noise on its own. It should be about a C octave because this is a C instrument to play in tune. So it's kind of cool because it makes that really fun noise. And then when I put it in the oboe, those vibrations go down through the entire instrument to make a sound like this. So in this particular piece, I happen to be a bumblebee or some sort of bee. It's very buzzy. And even though this is sort of buzzy, the noise I'm going to make while playing this piece is very buzzy. Would you like to hear it, Matt?
I would absolutely love to hear it. Let's hear it.
So here we go. In the first movement, this is what I'll do.
Wow, I could really hear the sounds of the buzzing bumblebees. That's amazing. Thank you, Amanda.
You're welcome. So that's kind of a fun thing that everybody will get to hear in this piece. The oboe is also known for its lyrical qualities, which I think is really special and that drew me to the oboe when I was 10 years old. So I would like to play another little excerpt that you'll be hearing later in the piece. this reed vibrates very much like the human voice. So you would never know that when I play it, but there's these two little blades, and they vibrate together, very much like when we sing. I won't sing for you now, but I'll play this little excerpt, and you can hear kind of the singing tone of the oboe. Would that interest you, Matt?
Absolutely, I'd love to hear that. Wow, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Amanda, for telling us more about the oboe and what it is capable of.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. All right, our next fable tells the story of the tortoise and the hare. Now we've got two animals, a fast one, the hare, and a slow one, the tortoise. Let's see if we can listen and pick out what instrument is playing the slow tortoise. A tortoise was plodding along one day, taking a long, slow walk, when suddenly a quick-footed hare appeared. He stopped to laugh at the tortoise and hopped in circles around him. "You are so slow, tortoise," he jeered. "How do you ever get where you're going?" "Oh, I always get where I'm going," said the tortoise. "In fact, I would like to challenge you to a race, and I bet that I win." The hare laughed until his cotton-tail shook. "Any time, you silly tortoise," he called as he hopped away. "Any time." The next day, a course was set up, and the big race was ready to begin. When the starting whistle blew, the hare hopped quickly down the road, leaving the lumbering tortoise far, far behind. Soon the hare was so far ahead that he decided to take a rest. He found a nice shady tree and laid down for a nap. He slept and dreamt of carrots. And while he snored, the tortoise plodded on and on. When the hare woke up a little later, he rubbed his eyes and looked up and down the road. There was no sign of the tortoise anywhere. "God, no old turtle's gonna beat me," he grumbled, and hopped as quickly as he could down the road. But he was too late. As he rounded the last corner, he saw the tortoise sitting just past the finish line under a shady tree, waiting for him with a smile on his face. Wow, that was incredible! And let me ask you, could you pick out which instrument was playing the character of the slow, heavy tortoise? I'll give you a hint. It's one of the instruments in our woodwind quintet, and it's the biggest, longest instrument with the deepest voice. It's called the bassoon. And I have my good friend Janet here to tell us about the bassoon. Hi, Janet.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. I'm very happy to be here today.
I'm so happy to have you here. Now, that instrument is so interesting. It's the biggest one in the woodwind quintet. Could you tell us about what makes it different and what sounds you can make?
Well, first of all, as you can see, it is a very big instrument. And what's kind of fun about the bassoon, I mean, it looks pretty big like this, right? You know, but it's really twice as long as it looks because somewhere in history they've folded it in half, so it's 8 feet long, you know, longer than a socially acceptable distance for
that is a
for
good
us
long
right
distance.
Yeah. And it's made of wood, right? And it has holes and it has keys so that we can change the notes. And we have lots of different notes that we can play. But, you know, the thing I really want to tell you about is this thing I have in my hand right here. It's called a double reed, and I think we heard Amanda talk about her double reed. Now, a reed, it looks like bamboo when it's growing. So this is a natural material, Matt. And what we do as bassoon players, oboe players, and some clarinet players, we make our own. We get the material, this nice hollow tube, and then we cut it into pieces, and we take stuff off of it, and then we put two of these pieces together, and there's a hole in each end. So that means I can get a beautiful sound out of it just by blowing in it. So I thought I might play this gorgeous sound for you. So let me get ready here. Well, beautiful to a duck, maybe, or not bad for New Year's. Yeah, not bad for New Year's Eve parties either. However, it does sound a whole lot better when I put it on my bassoon. So I'm going to play. I thought it might be kind of fun for me to play down to my lowest note because I do play a lot of the low notes in this. And then I thought I might play up a little bit high.
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah? I'd love to hear that.
So it has a large range. But mostly in our quintet today, you hear me play a lot of low notes.
Now, that piece you played with the Tortoise, could you play that one more time? It sounded like this slow, prodding sort of animal. I loved that sound.
I love how the composer figured out the bassoon should be the tortoise. I think a nice large instrument for a nice large animal. Let me play that for you one more time. I do. I love this tune here.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you so much, Janet, for joining me today and showing all of our students out there what the bassoon can do.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, well, it looks like it's time for our next fable, and the story we're going to be telling is The Fox and the Crow. And once again, put those listening ears on and see if you can figure out what instrument is playing the character of the fox. A big black crow, who was also rather ugly, was flying around one day, just looking for trouble. She came upon some kids having a picnic lunch and spied a tasty-looking cookie lying on the blanket.
That cookie would make a fine snack,
she cawed to herself and swooped down and grabbed it from one of the little kid's hands just as he was about to eat it.
Ha! Ha! Ha!
She laughed as she flew with the cookie back to her tree. A fox was walking beneath the branch when he looked up and saw the ugly crow with the cookie in her beak. His mouth began to water, and suddenly he got a wonderful idea. He called up to her with his nicest voice. "My, what a beautiful crow you are! Your feathers are so colorful. They look like a rainbow. And I'll bet your voice is even sweeter than that. Oh, beautiful crow, won't you sing for me?" The crow batted her eyelashes and smiled down at the fox, flattered by his compliments.
I'm sure that my voice is even more beautiful than my feathers,
she cackled, and she raised her big head and began to sing. And of course, as soon as she opened her beak, the cookie fell out of her mouth and into the jaws of the clever, hungry fox. That was just lovely. And if you were paying close attention, you may have heard some music playing the character of the sly, sneaky fox. Now that music was played on the clarinet. And I've got my good friend Tom here to tell us a little bit about that instrument. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Now to start things off, could you remind us what the music of the fox sounded like?
Okay, here's the fox music.
Wow, that was wonderful. And I could really hear and see the fox crawling around on the ground. Well, since you're here, could you tell us a little bit more about the clarinet as a whole?
Okay. Well, you know, the clarinet is made of special African wood named mapinga. That's what it's called. Same as the oboe. It's made with silver keys. What makes it different from the oboe is this part right here, this single reed. Okay. There's a reed on a mouthpiece. Let me see if I can get this off gently. And by itself, I mean, it really sounds great, right? Oh, maybe not. Maybe I should try it with the instrument. So the clarinet plays low pretty easily. Can play high. Play fast. Play slow. Slow's better. But the thing you really can do on the clarinet better than the other instruments is play quietly. And that's kind of how the clarinet works.
Wow, thank you so much, Tom. I had no idea the clarinet was so versatile and had so much range. I appreciate you being here today. One day, a mouse who lived way out in the country got a letter from her cousin who lived in a really big city far away. In the letter, the mouse said that she would be coming to the country for a visit the very next week. The country mouse was very excited, but also a bit nervous. My cousin is from a great big city full of neat things to do, she thought to herself. What if she's bored with my simple country way of life? She decided to plan something extra special. On the day of her cousin's arrival, the country mouse went off to the farmer's market. There she bought all the ingredients for a big country feast. She made 8-corn barley stew, cornbread, flower petal soup, and sweet wildberry pie. When she finished with all the cooking, she had just enough time to run to the train station and pick up her cousin. The moment the city mouse got off the train, she began complaining to her cousin. That was the most boring trip I've ever taken, she moaned. These country trains are so slow. Ugh, not at all like the ones we have in the city. Zip, zoom, they really get you where you're going. All the way back to her house, the country mouse listened to the city mouse tell amazing stories about life in the great big city. When they got back to the house, the country mouse brought out all the food that she had spent the day preparing. The city mouse turned up her nose right away. Acorn barley stew? Ugh! Flower petal soup? How can you eat such boring food? She asked. And how can you live in such a tiny hole out in the middle of nowhere? All of this is certainly nothing like my life in the big city. It's true, the country mouse thought to herself. The country is boring. My food is boring. My life is boring. She looked at the proud, well-dressed city mouse across the table. All right, cousin, she said. I want to be where the action is. Take me to the big city. It was very late at night by the time they arrived in the big city. Even so, the sidewalks were overflowing with people, and the streets were jammed with cars and trucks. All the buildings were lit up like giant Christmas trees that stretched endlessly up into the night sky. Watch out! Cried the city mouse. In her total amazement, the country mouse had wandered into the street and nearly been flattened by a speeding taxi cab. You've got to be very careful here in the big city, the city mouse told her cousin. You can't relax even for a second. The country mouse was beginning to have second thoughts about having come to the big city with her cousin. This place is scary, she said, and I'm hungry. You're hungry? Asked the city mouse. Well, have no fear, dear cousin. I know just the place. Follow me. The city mouse took off fast down the street, so fast that the country mouse could barely keep up. They darted through traffic and ran down alleyways. They leapt over trash cans and dumpsters. Just when the country mouse thought she couldn't run another step, they arrived at the back door of a very fancy restaurant. This is the place, said the city mouse. They slipped through a crack in the back door and into the kitchen. The country mouse couldn't believe her eyes. Inside there was steak and fresh seafood, fruits and vegetables of every kind. Wow, said the country mouse. This. But before she could say another word, the biggest, scariest cat she had ever seen leapt from the top of the refrigerator and landed almost on top of her cousin. Quick, cried the city mouse. We'll go out through the front. In an instant, they were charging through the crowded dining room. They leaped over tables and swam through bowls of soup. Waiters dropped their trays. Children screamed. Everybody dove for cover. The owner of the restaurant simply fainted. In a matter of seconds, the two cousins were on the sidewalk, panting. Don't worry, I know another place, said the city mouse. So do I, said the country mouse. My own place back in the country. But cousin, you've only just gotten here, said the city mouse. Yes, and now I'm leaving. The country may be boring, but at least it's not life-threateningly dangerous. Thank you, dear cousin, for showing me what a wonderful life I already have. Wow, that was absolutely delightful. And I don't know if you could hear, but when I was listening to that piece of music, I heard all sorts of little differences. For instance, when we were hearing about the city mouse, I heard lots of fast, upbeat music. But when we were learning about the country mouse, I heard all sorts of these long, beautiful, lyrical lines. Now, I'd like us to meet the person who played those lines, and that is my good friend Lisa, who plays the flute. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Matt. Like you said, this is the flute, and yes, I did play the melody of the country mouse. Here's how that goes.
Wow, that is absolutely beautiful. And you know, I could really imagine long rolling hills and sunshine coming down on the grass. Really captures the character of the country mouse. Now let me ask you, Lisa, that instrument, the flute, it looks a little bit different than some of the other woodwind instruments we've seen today. Could you tell me what makes it different?
Absolutely. So you notice, first of all, the oboe and the clarinet and the bassoon are all made out of wood. And they're called the woodwinds. We play them with wind, and they're made of wood. Well, flutes used to be made of wood. Now most of them are made out of metal. This one is made out of gold and silver. And also different than the other woodwinds, I don't use a reed to make my sound. So instead, I blow my air across this little tiny tone hole up at the top. And if you've ever tried with your water bottle to blow some air over the top and you made a note, that's the same way I'm getting a sound on my flute. And then when I want to change my notes from higher to lower, I use all these pretty little shiny keys. I love the flute because I think it's pretty to look at and pretty to listen to. Let me show you some of my lowest notes that I can play. And then some of my high ones, which are pretty high. So it's a very fun instrument to play. And in addition to the slow, lyrical, pretty things like the country mouse's melody, we sometimes get to play really fast notes. You want to hear some?
I would love to hear some fast notes. Wow, that was stunning. I had no idea the flute had so much range and capabilities. Thank you for teaching me about the flute today, Lisa.
Thanks, Matt. That was fun.
Well, it is time for our final story today. But before we get into that, there's one more instrument that I've been so eager to talk about. Now, it doesn't look like the rest of the other woodwind instruments. In fact, I don't know if it's a woodwind instrument at all. Now, Lauren, could you tell me about that interesting looking round tubular instrument you've got there?
Sure. This is called the French horn, and it's actually a brass instrument, but our sound blends with so many instruments so well we get to play in both brass quintets and woodwind quintets. So you notice my horn is made of metal, member of the brass family, but the way I make sound is actually a little bit different than the woodwinds. They blow into a reed, but my lips are actually the reed that buzz together. So what we do is we buzz our lips to make sound. That doesn't sound very pretty, right? So then we have this funnel mouthpiece, buzz our lips into that, and we can change pitch that way. Still not very pretty, right? So we can put it into our horn. We have 4 valves here, and we can make sound that way. So that's how the French horn works.
That is so interesting. Do you think you could play a couple notes?
Sure.
Wow. I really see it has a much different sound than the woodwinds.
Definitely.
Now let me ask you, Lauren, this final fable we're going to be telling today, it's called The Lion and the Mouse. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you play one of those 2 characters, don't you?
I do.
Which character do you play?
Well, I play the lion.
The lion. And what does the lion sound like?
The lion is a super regal character, king of the jungle.
Wow, that was amazing. Lauren, I can really see what you mean about the French horn having that regal, majestic sound, sort of like the king or queen of the jungle. That is so incredible. Thank you for playing for us today.
My pleasure.
All right, it's time for our final story, The Lion and the Mouse. Let's put our listening ears on one more time and see if we can hear the sound of the French horn. A lion can get mighty tired being the king of the jungle. It was the middle of the day, and he had already worked very hard, doing what lions do, like climbing trees, pouncing on ants, and scratching their ears. My goodness, it's exhausting being the king of the jungle, said the lion. A little nap is what I need. So he found a shady spot, walked in a few small circles, and curled into a cozy ball. Within minutes, he was snoring. At about that time, a mouse was hurrying through the jungle. Mice are always in a hurry, you know, and they don't pay much attention to where they are going. In fact, this mouse was in such a hurry that he didn't realize he was running right across the lion's nose until it was too late. The lion's eyes popped open, and he scooped the mouse up with his paw. You must know what happens to little mice when they wake the king from his nap, roared the lion.
Oh, please, your royal furball.
Your highness.
I mean, your kingship? Oh, if you let me go, then I will be able to help you someday.
You help me? Oh, that's a joke. But I will let you go, only because you make me laugh. The lion carefully placed the mouse back on the ground, and, as usual, the mouse hurried away. Later that week, the lion was working hard, doing what lions do, when he fell into a net made of rope, the very net used by the evil zookeeper. He became trapped, and the more he struggled, the louder and angrier he became. The mouse, who was way at the other end of the jungle, came running when he heard the lion's roars.
Don't worry, your highness,
squeaked the mouse.
help is here.
He began chewing on the ropes with his sharp little teeth. It wasn't long before the mouse had gnawed a hole in the net, and the lion was free. I never would have believed that a mouse could save the king of the jungle, roared the lion, and they became best friends for the rest of their lives. Wow, I had an absolutely wonderful time today listening to the Woodwind Quintet play this piece of music, Aesop's Fables. Now, did you know the composer of this piece, Tom Myron, is from right here in Maine, just like you and me? And he wrote this piece for the Portland Symphony Orchestra. Well, I've had such an incredible time with you today. Thank you for being here and joining me on this magical musical journey with the Portland Symphony Orchestra. See you next time.
This Portland Symphony Orchestra Woodwind KinderKonzert is sponsored by Gorham Savings Bank. The PSO's education partner is IDEX Laboratories. This KinderKonzert was also made possible in part by the following sponsors: